Look who's back. Lindsay joins the show to talk about the Atlanta Braves offseason. We got a couple of heated arguments maybe that are going to pop up on today's episode. We'll get into it on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's jump into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams every day, and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which, Lindsay, you may have heard, it is now the #1 sports podcast network. So thank you so much for tuning in here. I am your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Joining me today, as you very well know, Lindsay Crosby at Crosby Baseball, Braves Today newsletter, Braves Today podcast, all that good stuff where you can get Lindsay's content as well. And thank you so much for joining us here today. Thanks so much to all my everydayers out there. Maybe got a little bit of news coming up on that later in the show as well. But today's episode is just going to be a little bit of a free-form discussion between me and Lindsay, talking about the Braves offseason, maybe where we disagree on where the Braves should go. A lot of good fun stuff on today's episode of Locked On Braves, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. Well, Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me on the show. How's the offseason been treating you so far?
We've had plenty of things already happen for the Braves, which was a little bit surprising to me. It feels like this had the potential to be a slow offseason. When you think about Ha-Seong Kim being a Boris guy, they like to wait to sign. Thought it was going to be slow, but AA's already been in his bag. We already have Iglesias back. We already have Mauricio Dubon in the fold on a trade. And so plenty of stuff to talk about right now. And that's as content creators who cover the Braves, that's the biggest thing we can ask for.
Yeah, no shortage of content, certainly, for the Atlanta Braves this offseason so far. And I don't know about you, but I'm already counting down the days. You know me, and I know you as well. I'm a big college baseball enthusiast too, so you get that a little bit earlier. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's already, I mean, it hasn't even gotten completely cold here. I know I've got on the hoodie here, but I'm ready for baseball season. With the Braves not making the postseason, not that their trips here recently have lasted too long. It feels like it's already been a long off season for sure.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of like Dominican Winter League games because I just need baseball. So please, something come back, preferably Braves games. I can't wait to be in Northport. Hopefully I can make it down there in February, warm weather, get some Braves games early, even if you see the Stars play for 2 or 3 innings before they're done.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to that. I've been watching some minor league games, watching some old games as well. I need something. The NBA doesn't do it for me. NFL, I've watched maybe half of Falcons game this year. I'm ready for
You're
some
not
baseball.
Missing much, Jake. You're not missing much from the Falcons.
Yeah, that's what I can tell from my Twitter feed. All right, let's jump into this discussion though, because this is where I've gotten into some disagreements with some of the listeners in the comment section, because I am of the mind, Lindsay, that unless you go get Corey Seager, which it looks like that's more and more not likely, unless you go get Bo Bichette, unless you get a premier bat to be your shortstop, I'm of the mind that a big bat is needed somewhere. And that they still need to go, and I keep saying big bat, but like a good bat. Like you still need help offensively, even if you were to get Ha-Seong Kim, which we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I am of the mindset that a good to big bat is needed this offseason. Do you agree with that?
I think they need to add offensively because the issue here, right? If you think about what you're losing in Marcell Ozuna, 2025 wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, playing through the hip injury. But look at 23 and 24 together. He averaged just under 40 home runs and 102 RBI a year. And we saw last year, I think you and I talked about this a lot, we saw what happened when you didn't have a healthy rotation to carry the team. The offense wasn't carrying the load, and missing that version of Marcell Ozuna was part of that. The question that I have, and you kind of touched on it, is what defines big bat? Because again, you're trying, like, if you're replacing 40 homers and 100 RBI, you don't have to get all of that from the guy you sign. Like, you don't have to go get Kyle Schwarber. That'd be cool, right? You don't have to get Kyle Schwarber to replace that production, but how much do you need that bat to give you versus how much should you be able to get from a fully healthy Austin Riley, from a fully healthy Ronald Acuna Jr., a Jurickson Profar who doesn't miss half the season for a suspension. And that's where I really struggle. Like, how much can you count on getting from the offense that you didn't get last year versus how much do you need to get from an outside addition? And that's where I'm really struggling. Like, do you go for a guy like a Ryan O'Hearn? Somebody who can play corner outfield, he can cover first base. God forbid something happened to Matt Olson. You go for a platoon bat, a Mike Tauchman, something like that. Or do you need to find an everyday bat in the outfield and just be confident that something's going to happen to make playing time available for everybody, right? Like, I don't know where I come down on how big the bat needs to be, but I do agree you've got to find more offense than just sign Ha-Seong Kim and call it an offseason.
Yeah, because I put out the two kind of scenarios that I think you could do. And that one is that you go get a big bat in some sort. And we're talking about the one big bat that I like that maybe you don't, but go get out a big bat of some
Cody
point.
Bellinger.
Or you do what you kind of mentioned a minute there, and you go find, a platoon partner. You get the Ryan O'Hearn, and then you can get a righty, to kind of counteract that. And I think that's okay. And I think that also gives you a little bit more depth on your team. So I don't hate that idea either. Mm-hmm. But the overarching thought is that you can't just sit back offensively. You've got to go back. You got to go out and do after what we've seen the last 2 years. And you can blame injuries if you want to, but even when these guys have been healthy, they've regressed a little bit. And while I think Austin Riley can get back to being, an MVP type of candidate, I think, Acuna full season, obviously it can be one of the best players in baseball. There's still some concern in that lineup. I don't know what to expect from Ozzie coming back from another hand wrist injury. I don't know what to expect from Michael Harris if he can't change these swing decisions. So I think you have to address the offense as well. And I'm not fully on board with just going into the season and saying Drake Baldwin and Sean Murphy are going to be our catcher DH either. One, because we don't know the health of Sean Murphy going into the season. So right. I do very much believe that a bat needs to be, even outside of the shortstop position, they still need to look for a bat. And one that I very much like and that I think is a perfect fit for what the Braves need is Cody Bellinger. So before I make my case, because I know all my listeners have heard that, give me your argument for why he wouldn't be a great fit for the Braves.
I think what I'm concerned about with Cody Bellinger is he's been poor enough in the past where he was non-tendered by several teams. But when you look at who he was last year, he still chased more than the average hitter. The difference there was he just made contact. It wasn't the best quality contact, right? He wasn't hitting the ball particularly hard. And I think my concern is that Cody Bellinger outperformed a lot of his inputs because of the ballpark, right? He's an extreme, he was extreme pull hitter. He's in Yankee Stadium. You look at his spray chart and almost every single home run is pull side. I don't think he even had anything to the center fielder that left the ballpark. And yes, you get that in Atlanta, but I think my concern is locking yourself into a long-term deal for a Cody Bellinger when it feels like he's one slip in contact rate away from being a below average bat is why I'm concerned. If it was Cody Bellinger on a 2 or 3 year deal, sure, great, fine. But it feels like this is the offseason. He's going to finally want that 5 or 6 year deal. And again, he's chasing a lot. He's not really hitting the ball particularly hard. If that contact rate drops, what else does he have? He walks at a league average amount. So if the contact rate drops, his strikeout rate goes up, the chase isn't helping you. There's not a lot else there offensively to carry the profile other than that contact rate.
Yeah, and I guess my counter argument to that, in my evolution of Cody Bellinger, I was somebody that I always thought he was overrated. Even back when he was winning MVPs, I thought he was overrated. I thought this is a profile that is going to fall apart. And then it did fall apart, and he fell off the map. But I think why I'm more bought into. You're right. And that's why I'm kind of more bought into him now, because he did fix it. It's become a completely different player, but I also think it's become a player that the Braves need. Like, you're right. If the contact rate does drop off, then, obviously it's going to affect his value, but the type of hitter that he's turned himself into, going from a guy that struck out 27% of the time to now striking out, 15, 16% of the time, I think that is more the type of the hitter that the Braves need of putting the ball in play. And the park factor between, and I know you kind of said this too, it's still good in Atlanta for left-handed hitters. The park factor, according to Baseball Savant, is the same. And home runs are almost the same. There is more at Yankee Stadium, but I don't see that as much.
31. It's one of the better parks for him, actually. Good call. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not, look, obviously it all is going to depend on the deal. I'm not saying I would pay $30 million a year for Cody Bellinger, which is, I think, what MLB trade rumors projected him as. But I just think the type of hitter that he has become now is more where the game is headed. And it seems like where the Braves offense is headed, where it is more contact oriented. It might be more 20-25 home run power instead of 35-40 home run power. But I just think that type of bat is where the Braves are starting to transition. And the fact that he can play all three outfield spots, play them all well. If something happens with Michael Harris and he regresses, Cody B could play in center field, could also back up Matt Olson at first base to get him a day off his feet in the DH spot. I just think he does so many things well for this team to be a good fit. But you're right. It is about price. I think he goes back to the Yankees ultimately, but I just think he fits in so many different ways there.
Yeah, and that defensive thing, having a plus defensive outfielder at all three spots and some first base insurance isn't something you've really had in Atlanta in a while because we've never considered moving Michael Harris. Looking at the aggregate projections, right? There's a John Becker of Fangraphs has a spreadsheet where he combined MLB trade rumors, a lot of the other projections. He has 5 years, 140 for Bellinger, so like $28 million a year. I'm still a little bit hesitant to sign up.
25 is kind of where I'd be for even 5 or 6 years. I'd be okay with, but I'd be want more around that $25 million range.
Yeah, being at 28 is a little bit scary, but I will say it is knowing that like you probably can get him for less than 30 and having the defensive value. I do think that helps a little bit. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, my concern is that we've never really seen the Braves sign up for the decline years of a hitter under Alex Anthopoulos, right? They've always been a short-term deal, something like the Josh Donaldson deal, or it's been, we have you extended into age 33, 34 at the most. And with Bellinger, you give him the 5, you're signing up for his age 35 season. I worry about how effective he'll be at that point. But I do think that you're right in that his offensive approach fits with what Tim Hires wants to do, fits with a lot of the guys you've added, like a Jurickson Profar. He also doesn't hit the ball incredibly hard, but he has great contact rates. It all comes down to how confident do they feel that what he's doing and what he did in Yankee Stadium will translate and that it's sustainable 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road. I do think anybody you sign in free agency near the top of the market, it's going to be multiple years and you're probably going to have a bad one on the end. But I can see the argument for Cody Bellinger, how he fits what the Braves want to do. And at the very least, he should defensively be useful in 5 years.
Yeah. So obviously I've convinced Lindsay here. It makes too much sense not to.
It does.
Go get. Look, it's a moot point anyway because I don't think the Braves are signing him. Like I said, I think he's probably going back to the Yankees. But I just think the type of hitter that he has turned himself into and just the defensive versatility, it makes him a pretty ideal fit for me. But again, I don't think the Braves are going to spend that much money on him, so it probably doesn't matter in the end. What does matter, though, is the shortstop position. They already have Mauricio Dubon. Does it make sense to still go after Ha-Seong Kim? We'll talk about that here next. Lindsay, the NBA season is here. I know we're waiting for baseball season, but the NBA is here, NFL, NHL, college basketball, War Eagle, all of that happening right now, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who scores next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. And just looking at the World Series odds, Lindsay, they still have the Atlanta Braves at plus 2,000, eighth best odds. They got to improve that. They didn't see that Mauricio Dubon move. They're not up to date on that move yet here. But you can also see NBA Finals predictions, NBA Cup odds, all of that you can see out there at FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I think as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day, and make sure that you are really subscribed and locked into Locked On Braves, because me and Lindsay got some exclusive content that's going to be coming your way in the coming weeks. Can't give away too much information yet, but just be aware that me and Lindsay got some more stuff in the works. So make sure you subscribe here to Locked On Braves so you can get that when it becomes available. Well, Lindsay, let's jump back into our conversation here, though, about Ha-Seong, not even Ha-Seong Kim, but Mauricio Dubon. The Braves made the trade for Mauricio Dubon. Feels like just kind of a, if all else fails, we have Dubon at shortstop type of move, an insurance type of move. And you look at what all is available out there in the shortstop markets, particularly in free agency. We know Bo Bichette, like, I think he can handle the shortstop position well enough if he's going to give you that big offense. But are you going to do that for 8 years, 200, 300 million, whatever?
Qualifying offer.
Yeah, all of that. Like, I don't think, like I said with Cody Bellinger, I don't think they're going to do it for Bo Bichette either. But if it's not him, your chances of getting a shortstop this offseason are very limited. And with where Dubon is, and we know he's a Gold Glove level defender, and the bat's really not that much worse than what Ha-Seong Kim has been on his career. How much are you willing to pay Ha-Seong Kim right now, Lindsay, knowing you already have Dubon at $6 million?
For me, the argument to sign Ha-Seong Kim isn't really about Mauricio Dubon. It's about everybody else. Because if you think about the last 2 seasons, you've had to cover for either injury or a suspension every defensive position but first base. Like you've had to cover for Michael Harris having a hamstring and a back issue. You've had to cover for Ronald's knee injury, Profar being suspended, Riley, Ozzie, everybody. And Dubon can play every single one of those positions at an above average level. His highest and best value to the Braves is the ability, if anybody goes down or is even questionable. We've seen recently under Brian Sitka where the Braves let guys play when they were nicked up, and some of them made these injuries worse. The best and highest use of Mauricio Dubon is being able to plug him in at any spot on the field. So for me, signing Ha-Seong Kim is not a question about would I rather Mauricio Dubon play shortstop or not. It's about if Riley goes down or Profar goes down, would I rather plug in Mauricio Dubon, or would I rather grab a DFA'd guy like a Gio Urshela and plug him in as the starter? And I think when people say the difference in Dubon and Kim is not that big, I think they're ignoring what Mauricio Dubon can give you at other positions that Nick Allen could not. Like we saw this last year. We saw Vidal Brujan playing third. We saw Brett Wisely playing second. And it feels like the team would have been better had they had an everyday shortstop and they could plug Dubon in at some of those spots, get really good defense, and have the offensive potential.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. As I said, when the move happened, I think Dubon is a great utility player, bench player that you can use him in many different ways. You can use him, you can use him against lefties. He has really good numbers against lefties off the bench. You can use him as a defensive replacement. You can use him when somebody inevitably gets injured. So I do think the value for Dubon is as a bench utility player. And even the guys, I talked to the guys, H-Town Willhouse and Eric over at Locked On Astros, and that's what they said. They said he's a really good bench player, but we've unfortunately had to play him 130 plus games because of injuries and such. And
that's the other concern I have. Yeah.
And that's what happens is that, you have these bench players, but eventually those bench players become everydayers because somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to regress. So I agree, even though I don't think that the difference in Dubon, and let's say you sign Ha-Seong Kim for $15 million, I don't know that the difference between those two players is $10 million. And look, just the contracts are what they are. But I do think still getting Ha-Seong Kim is a plus because it allows you to use Dubon in many different ways, like you said. So I do still think they need to go after him. I think it does get Alex a little bit more leverage to say, we got a guy now that we feel comfortable in rolling out at shortstop. Yeah. We don't have to meet Boris's demands of, I don't know what he's asking for, 20 million, whatever. I'm sure Boris is asking for the moon, but it does give Alex a little bit more leverage, I think, in those negotiations. Anything more on that? Go ahead.
Yeah. Something that I keep thinking about Walt Weiss going on, I think it was 680 The Fan after he got hired, was he talked about the days off and how he planned on rotating guys through a little bit more than they did under Brian Snitker. And I do think if you also think about the investment in Kim as an investment at keeping Ronald Acuna Jr. on the field or Austin Riley on the field, I think it's a little more palatable to say, yeah, if we have to give $15-16 million to Ha-Seong Kim, that's really, we're doing that to make sure we still have Austin Riley for 150 games. We have, these veterans, and it gives you insurance if Michael Harris continues to struggle this year. You touched on that earlier. If he continues to struggle, it gives you a guy you can plug in at center field for a week and let Michael Harris kind of mentally reset or send him down if you have to and bring him back. So I'm willing to go a little bit farther than I think a lot of people are on Kim, simply because I want the depth of a utility guy. And if you think about it, Atlanta's been paying this $6.5 million for a utility guy the last couple seasons. It was just David Fletcher, and he was stuck in Double-A because he wasn't very good and being investigated for gambling. So the fact that money's off the books, you're really still not allocating money to shortstop because you were already paying that just to a guy you weren't using.
Yeah, no, I think that's been my biggest point, or my main point this offseason is just depth. That's what I'm looking for. Like, I still believe in this core, and I still believe if they play to their expectations and stay healthy, I still believe it's a good team, even if you did very little this offseason. But my main point has been, after what's happened and what we've witnessed the last 2 years with injuries and regression, you need to make it a point to get as much valuable depth as you can. And I think Dubon is that. I think he is great depth. But he is depth. He's not necessarily a guy that you want to have to put out there every day unless something happens or an injury happens. So I definitely agree with that. Next, I want to get into starting pitching a little bit and what the Braves might do the rest of this offseason. We'll get into all of that here next. NFL season is here, and there's no better place to get into the game when you're there live in the crowd. It makes things so much more exciting, and when you're surrounded by your fans cheering you on, unless you're going to an Auburn game. Lindsay, not much to cheer about here this year, but big game coming up this weekend. But let's be honest, getting tickets to these games, trying to go to the Iron Bowl, it's tough. You got queues, login screens, prices jumping at checkout. It can be very frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Even if you don't want to believe that price you see, it is the price that you're going to pay when you get to the checkout screen. I know whenever I'm going to a Braves game, I'm looking at Game Time. The last Braves game I went to this past year, I got last minute tickets in section 41. Really great deal for me and the entire family. Yeah, it was really, really nice. So I always use Game Time. I even use it to go to a college football game this off season. So you're going to love it as well. So make sure you download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Just swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, Lindsay, let's wrap things up here. I want to talk about starting pitcher and trade that happened on Tuesday. The Cardinals sending Sonny Gray to the Boston Red Sox for a couple of prospects and sending $20 million over there. I know Sonny Gray has been a name that I feel like has been rumored, at least among Braves fans, for trade interest for like 10 years now. I don't know that anybody's ever been mentioned more as a possible trade candidate for the Braves than Sonny Gray. And it won't be this time. We'll see what happens during the season with the Red Sox. If they're out of it, I'm sure we'll have people at the deadline wanting for the Braves to trade for him again. Look, I think my take on it is, Sonny Gray's a good pitcher. I would not mind having him. And I said, for it to happen, the Cardinals would have to eat $15-20 million of that contract. And they did. But the Red Sox did have to chip in, a really good prospect. I know you kind of comped it to, I think, Elder and Murphy. I said Elder and Bauman, but that same type of thing, just a guy that you could plug into your rotation, depth now, and a promising young prospect. So I think the price was fair for Sonny Gray. I wouldn't have hated if the Braves had done it. Also, don't know that I would have been jumping around screaming, excited if they did it either. But what were your kind of thoughts on that deal for Sonny Gray?
It kind of came out money-wise where I thought it would. I kind of assumed it'd have to be $20 million because he was owed $40 million when you count in the buyout of the 26 option, and that whole deal's kind of been restructured. He's now owed 41 total, and again, Boston's covering only 20 of that. I'm glad to see Boston learn their lesson about, They gave us Chris Sale and paid his salary, and he won a Cy Young. Now they're getting a guy and his part of his salary is paid. I think the benefit of Sonny Gray and the reason why I've wanted him in Atlanta since he was leaving Minnesota was the consistency, right? He's been out there, and other than like he's made the lowest number of starts since 2021 is 24, but he's got 24, 26, 32, 28, and 32 starts. And the biggest issue we've seen with the Braves is outside of Bryce Elder, you've sometimes had questions about who is going to start in this next series. And AA's tried to work it out. He's tried to do spot starters, pushing guys back and all of that. The consistency of Sonny Gray and the fact that you wouldn't be terrified to throw him in game 3 of the series was why I wanted Sonny Gray. The deal came out where I thought it was going to. I do think Owen Murphy and Bryce Elder would be a little bit more than I think you'd want to pay for 1 year of Sonny Gray. But if he got here, I do think he probably would have been your number 3 or number 4 starter. And for a lot of other teams, it looks like for Boston, he's going to be their number 2. And I think that's Atlanta was in a better position to be selective with this deal than Boston was.
Yeah, this is kind of part of the argument I made on yesterday's podcast, or maybe even today's. I don't know what today. Earlier this week, I talked about J.R. Ritchie.
There you go.
And my argument there for whether to trade or keep him was there's a chance that J.R. Ritchie, I mean, he's 22. It's still a big jump from the minors, and he's got to make that transition. Mm-hmm. There's a chance he just becomes your middle of the rotation arm in the very, very near future. So for me to have to trade J.R. Ritchie, I need to get something back pretty significant because I think he can be a part of this rotation for a long time. Now, I do think Sonny Gray is a better pitcher, and especially right now for 2026, he would be a better pitcher. But you're talking about getting a guy for 1 year as opposed to having a guy that could be in your rotation for 4 or 5 years and give you maybe similar type of value, whatever you think the ceiling is for J.R. Ritchie. I put him as the number 3 type of starter, and Sonny Gray's been better than that in the past, but it's weighing that immediate need versus, giving up somebody that I think is pretty much ready and could be a big part of your future.
Yeah. And I do think if it was a deal for somebody like Pablo Lopez, who has 2 years of control, or Joe Ryan, who has 2 years of control and is cheaper, I think a price like having to give up a Murphy or a Ritchie is a little more palatable in that situation than the fact that Sonny Gray is 1 year of control, because we found out later that option that everybody thought was a club option is actually a mutual option, and those virtually never get picked up. So the 1 year of control is what I think was the ultimate stopping point for me on that deal, was when we found out that wasn't a club option, that was a mutual option. I'm kind of with you where unless you think Atlanta needs to push in all of the chips right now and make a desperate push while they have Chris Sale, I don't think this deal made a lot of sense. If you're of the perspective that once Chris Sale leaves, and you're possibly going to lose Ozzie, Ronald's 1 year closer to being gone. If you're of the perspective that, Profar in his final deal, you've got to get a World Series in now, I could see making this deal. But I think that Atlanta's window should be a little bit larger than that. And they're not in the same boat, and they could go ahead and set their sights for somebody with more control than Sonny Gray.
Yeah, no, I do think, and this is going to be my last question to you here because I want to get your thoughts. I do think they need to get a starter, even if you have to go to a 6-man rotation, which I am fully on board with all of the pitcher injuries the Braves have had. I do think they need to add another starter, even if it's just a mid-rotation, veteran, innings eater type of starter. I do think that needs to be a priority this offseason as well. Do you agree?
I also agree. I will say, though, AA talked about a 6-man rotation and how difficult it is on the press conference that we did for the Raisel Iglesias ad. And in essence, he said that they can do it for a short time period, but for a full season, a 6-man rotation, he wants to. He's wanted to for 5 years. It's just not sustainable because the first time you have a starter that goes short and you have a bunch of days off, you have a bunch of days without a day off and non-optionable relievers, you get into a jam. So that's also changed my thinking too, is the fact that AA said we can't do it long-term. They try to replicate it with the spot starters and the extra days off, but because the fact they can't do it consistently, I think having optionable pitchers in AAA and having 5 guys that you trust to take the ball in the postseason is incredibly important. and your goal is just get them to the postseason. Add another guy that you think you can throw in game 3 of the postseason, so that if you have 5 to start the year, or 6 if you count Waldrop as 1, you should have 3 left by the time you get to October. But they just can't run a full 6-man rotation all year. AA said they've tried and they can't do it.
Yeah, and I don't think my expectation is to do it all year, but like if you look at the rotation, right? Yeah, it's like, because right now you could say Sell, Schwellenbach, Strider, Elder, Waldrop. You could say you have a 5-man rotation right now. Obviously, Waldrop has options. Elder might not be as appealing to some, but even if you just go get an arm and say you want to start the year with those 6 guys, one of them's either going to fall apart or one of them's going to get injured within the first month of the season. And so it's more for me, to just use that word again, it's just about depth. It's about getting that depth, because like you said, there's going to be attrition along the way, and it's trying to make sure that, one, you get to the postseason. Now that's become a question for this Braves team, unfortunately, but making sure you have at least three healthy starters that you trust once you get there. So it's just all about having that depth. Well, Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Looking forward to doing some more work with you again, just kind of teasing at me and Lindsay got some exclusive content going to be coming your way in the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for that. But enjoyed this discussion with you on today's episode. Obviously, we'll get back together again for a more full-length episode this offseason to discuss more of the Braves moves and everything going on. Make sure you follow Lindsay on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, the Braves Today newsletter, Braves Today podcast. Lindsay covering baseball, Braves baseball, everywhere, baseball in general too, Auburn as well, if you enjoy that type of thing. And make sure that you all have a great Thanksgiving. Hope you all have some safe travels. No, Lindsay getting ready for a good long drive himself. So hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. We'll be back here on Friday for our mailbag edition of the Locked On Braves. So look for my post from LockedOn_Braves on X Friday morning. Submit your question to that podcast or to that post to be answered on our Friday mailbag podcast. So again, Lindsay, thanks so much for being here. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you.